So the internet said that my math is wrong when I show people how to get all the money back for every car they buy, drive, and own. So I decided to put that strategy to the test because math is the equalizer and math should solve this. This whole debate started when Caleb from Better Wealth and I did a podcast and we were talking about how I use my infinite banking concepts and all my policies to buy cars and how I get all the money back and actually make money. So that's where it started, and a lot of people said it doesn't work that way, but today I'm gonna show you the math. We're gonna show you exactly how this whole thing transpired. So if you're not a believer of the infinite banking concepts or just using it to buy cars, you're gonna love this. Let's dive in.
Talk to me about why you use IBC for cars, because that's probably the biggest disagreement we might have on the internet.
I have a family and I collect Porsches, so that's a problem. But we also have 2 cars in our family that we drive every single day. And I just simply did the math. I did the math on how much money it would cost me to finance those at the lowest offered loan rate out there in the industry. And when I started doing that, I was kind of astonished.
What interest rate was it coming?
It depends on the time period when I did this. I mean, going back to when I first started this 10 years ago, you get a car loan for 3-4%. Now today it's like 6, 7, 8. Well, keep going. I mean, but that's where you're at. But back then it was 3-4%. But here's the thing. When I added up how much I was paying and losing, on cars, it was pretty astonishing at 3-4%, which you cannot get a car loan today at 3-4%. So then what I did is I literally just ran the math of what if I did it through the policy? And what if I just paid myself back the exact monthly payment that I would have paid a bank? I did it with several cars, but I was playing this game with the sales guy, and he'd go back to the manager, come back, slide me over the rate. I say, no, you got to beat this. And I was just playing off the monthly amount. I wanted the lowest monthly payment for the car. This is how everybody buys a car, and this is why I did it. 3 or 4 times back and forth, and he slides it over. He says, Chris, I'm sorry. This is absolutely our final and best. There is no better offer we can give. And I look at my wife, and she's just still pissed off, because I'm just playing games. And I said, yeah, I'll take that. And he's like, great. I said, you got a deal. So he then slides this big pile of paperwork over the credit applications. And I slid it back to him and said, I don't need this. And he said, well, why? And I said, well, because we're paying cash for the car. I said, I'm doing this through my private banking system. And he says, well, why did you have me going back? He was actually pretty pissed off. And at this time, I did not know dealerships made money on financing. I just thought this was just a convenience they did to get people to buy the car where they made the money. No. They make money on the financing. And later I found this out that I actually kind of screwed him because he had negotiated the price of this vehicle down because they factored in that they were making money on this financing, to which I just stripped him. So he then says to me, he says, well, why did we do all that? And I said, well, because I had to figure out what the lowest monthly payment would be for me to pay my bank back at, my banking system. He didn't understand it then, but that was the whole thing. So when I buy cars, I always make a car payment, but I make a car payment back to myself. So let's just take the policy right out of this. Okay. This is where I get a lot of hate. The infinite banking concepts is a process. Yes, they include the whole life insurance policy because it makes it more efficient, but it doesn't have to be included to have the infinite banking concept work, the banking function, if you will. You could use a bank account. You could use a 401k. So if I just did what I just explained with a bank account, I saved up enough to buy this Porsche. I paid cash for the Porsche. I made the exact car payment I would have made to the Porsche dealership, but I made it back to myself. Well, I'd get all the money back for the car after 5 years plus the interest. So then when I started doing it with the policy made it just a wee little bit better. I had a little bit more money, and plus I had a death benefit, and plus my money was protected from judgments and liens and all those green check marks. So you can agree to disagree or just agree, it's just a more efficient way to buy cars. And I have bought no less than 20 vehicles using this system. I've gotten money back on all my money back on every car. And now I even play it now. I got a G-Wagon right here that I just sold. Kind of a stupid overpriced vehicle, but nonetheless, I financed that one through. I overpaid for the vehicle. I did.
Yeah.
Because it was after COVID. I overpaid for it. I knew I overpaid for it, but it didn't matter because I knew if I made payments back to my bank, I would close that gap. So I just sold the vehicle for $134,000, and most people would have lost 40 grand on that deal from what I paid to what I did. But I actually made money because I was ahead of the game because I used the infinite banking concept to buy it. So that's why.
Okay. Can we hash this out as we land the plane?
Sure.
Okay. I I I think you know how Nelson talks about volume versus rate?
Yeah.
And I think the pure goal is to help people save more money. And so there's no doubt when people are motivated by things like cars, they will find ways to just save more. So I want to acknowledge that. And then I want to talk from just a pure mathematical standpoint. So we both have cash value available. And I could, let's say I'm going to buy a car and my policy is at 6%. I'll just say that I can access it. I'm gonna play both ways here. And let's say I could get a 4% loan, and my whole goal is to save more money to increase the capital. I will be able to have more money for the Williams Capital Life Insurance if I take the bank loan, take the difference, and put it in forms of PUAs or premium.
What I didn't catch something. To take what difference?
So this for scenario number
6
one
to the 4?
Yeah. So if I could borrow at a car dealer at 4%, and I could take a loan at 6% from my personal bank, I would be better off taking the 4%, taking the additional 2% that I would have paid the insurance company, which is not wrong. They're not, but it would go to the insurance company, not me. And I would have more money in that scenario. That's where it's like
I could prove you wrong.
No,
mathematically,
Chris, respectfully, you can't, because this is like pure math.
I know the math, but I could, because you're missing a key component.
Do it. This will be like the greatest thing for your channel, because we'll just like come up. But like,
so I can explain how,
because that's not how the math works.
Well, it does. So hold on, because when you take the payment, okay, that you're making, so take your car payment that you're making at 4%. If you just take that same exact car payment, because you could get a loan from the bank at 4%, so don't make your loan more just because your policy loan interest rate's 6. And if I took that loan payment and I paid it back to my policy, recycling and recapturing it as a loan repayment, what happens is after 1 year, I didn't pay 6% to the insurance company because I've been paying down the loan. So the APR is more like 4% at that. Second year, I'm doing the same thing. My APR, because I'm paying interest, simple interest on a declining balance, the APR is now in the low 3% range, and then 2% the next year. And I'm working off of a 5-year loan. So when you average that out and you average the APR, the interest you actually paid to the insurance company, not the interest that the insurance company was charging, you are way ahead, even at 4%. Mathematically certain.
Okay, can I be a little late, and then and I have time. I don't have a.
I'm happy to show the math. I need a calculator. You got a calculator at your fingertips. I don't.
Yeah. So let me just do.
Because you got to factor in what you could earn on that 2% difference and roll that back into the equation. But I think you'd be hard pressed.
I'm assuming the same thing. So this is where this is where I think. And this is not a get you. This is probably the one biggest.
Oh yeah,
thing.
no. Because go ahead.
You know me. I'm not here trying to. Okay, so you have. Okay, we're gonna do Chris and Caleb, right? You have Chris and Caleb. Okay, just to make math extremely simple, we're gonna say the payment, and let's say we have cash value. Can we both agree that? Let's just say these are identical policies.
Sure.
So we have cash value over here. Cash value over here. Okay, we're gonna let's say the payment is $1,000. So the
simple math, $1,000 a month car payment.
We want to buy a car. Okay, and let's say and we're already funding our policies, so none of that is going to change. And let's say the car dealership over here will give us a payment at $1,000.
Yeah, call it 4% interest.
Okay. So $1,000 payment. Or I could take a policy loan at $1,200. Just assuming that it's a little bit higher interest rate.
Well, yeah, but don't assume it's a higher interest rate.
Well, that was my first assumption is 6% versus 4%.
See, I wouldn't do it that way. I would pay myself my policy back the exact amount I would have paid the bank. And if the bank's offering a loan at 4%, I would pay myself exactly what the bank was offering and the dealership was offering.
Well, okay. So but that's just, that's a talking point that I've never heard before, because I don't. So I
think it's silly. Nobody in their logical mind would pay more just to pay it back to themselves when they could get it cheaper from a bank.
Okay, so you do agree with me that
100%.
in this scenario, you would take the bank?
No, I would not.
Okay.
We haven't got that far. But what I'm agreeing with you on is the $1,000 car loan that you could have got from the bank. Okay. I would only, if I was doing it from my bank, my policy, I would only pay my bank back $1,000. I would not pay my bank back more. Like, that's,
so you would
pay,
even if your interest rate was at 6%, you would pay an equivalent of
because what I just explained, it won't matter in a second. But just put $1,000.
I think that's a person. I don't necessarily think that matters to the equation. But okay, so here we go. So Chris, in this scenario, you're going to take a policy loan, and again, like, just hear me out. You're going to pay $1,200. Trust me, I'm not going to be weird with math. I'm going to take the 1,000, and Caleb over here is going to put an additional 200 into my policy. So we're the same cash flow is the same, but Chris, I'm telling you, over time, Caleb will have more money than Chris in this scenario, because
this would be a cool part too, because we can model this.
Yeah, but Chris, there's nothing to Chris, you're paying back a loan. These are the same. This is identical policy. What's going to be better? What's better for the policy? A loan repayment or new premium?
Okay, that's a simple one. A loan repayment in this scenario would be better because you're talking about a 6% loan rate. So if I'm repaying the policy, but see, the difference is, and I know how you're modeling this, and you can continue to model it this way, but I would be paying my policy back $1,000. If you're saying the cost is $1,200 at 6%, because you're saying that the 6 versus the 4 is a $200 delta. Okay, so that is true the first month. But the second month, after I make $1,000 payment back to my policy as a loan repayment, that is not true anymore. And then the next month, so every month I'm paying $1,000 back, which means the insurance company is no longer charging me $1,200. They're charging me with the 6% on whatever the declining balance.
The reason why it's a half truth, respectfully, because you're not wrong, but you're not operating.
I'm 100% right.
Opportunity cost. You're looking at
right. I'm not talking about the opportunity cost at this point. I'm just talking the math on the top part.
This is what I'm saying.
You're talking about the $200 going into the policy. Is that going to outweigh? I've never run the math on that, but I'd love to.
But it's not like we don't even need to run a calculator, because just do the logic. If we have the same exact policy, I'm not talking about I'm just talking about the same exact policy, and we have $100,000 in both. Okay, you took a loan and let's say non-direct recognition. So you took a loan again. So I technically have more capital than you to begin with, because I'm taking their money over here. I'm holding on. Now, that could be a good thing or a bad thing. As an entrepreneur, I'd rather have the money and options.
I'll agree with you.
Options. That's a different talking point.
I agree with you on that.
So then what in this scenario, if we're taking the same 1,200, Chris over here is putting all 1,200 back to repay back the loan. Okay. Whereas remember, your policy is going to be identical. These policies are growing identical. All I'm doing is Caleb, am putting an additional 200. So not only do I have all of my 100,000, whereas you're now paying back, getting back to that 100,000 of liquidity. Our policies are growing the exact same. The only difference is I'm adding 200, and logic would say, I'm adding 200 to this scenario. I'm going to have more money over time.
I'm not going to agree. I will run the math, because it, to me, is not as logical as you're making it out to be, because you're using your numbers and your logic. I get it, but I'm just a mathematics guy. That's why we created the Vault software, is to prove mathematics and to run multiple scenarios in one particular example using the policies. So this is a very simple thing. And I think it would be a sweet second podcast to kind of just hash this out. Now, I'm not saying you're wrong.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, let's let Matt
and then maybe on the next episode, I'll even talk from a math standpoint, but then I could even make the argument, and I would be wrong. I could make the argument that let's just say this payment's $1,400, $1,400, I could still make the argument that I would still take the loan from the bank, even though mathematically I would be less behind. Because it would be obvious that you would now have an additional 200 that you could put into your policy, apples to apples. You would actually be ahead, and we could have a conversation around like, why would I take precious capital, put it into a depreciating asset or an asset, doesn't matter, that a bank will give when like I have access to like money. So for me, that's a whole different. That's not I'm admitting that.
Yeah, that is
scenario,
a personal preference thing. That really is, and I can answer for myself. And I've gone public, on my YouTube and my webinars explaining this over and over. Several years ago, like when I started buying the Porsches, I've always loved Porsches since I was a little kid, and I never had one. So now, I have 5, but it has nothing to do with the Porsches. Okay, so please don't hang up on that. What it was for me, I saw a declining economy. I saw a future investment world that was not safe and was not secure. And I was pulling money back out of investments, okay, real estate investments, selling real estate, closing out loans that I had done on that. And I had all this cash value. And I did not have anywhere for that money to go to work. Okay, I have no debt. Outside of my mortgage, I have no debt. Okay, so I was in a kind of, this is a personal thing. I needed to move money. I needed to do something with that money. So I started using it to buy this car collection. And also, this isn't why I do it, but this is just at that point why I bought more cars with this versus investing that money or versus financing it. I needed to move capital. Okay. Now I know that doesn't apply to some of the people listening. this is a personal preference, and every client, every person listening will have a personal preference on where they move money and what they invest in. This was just mine. It was the safest place because right now, if I go to a bank, a car loan 6%, if I pay myself back at the same exact rate I would pay on a car loan, 6%, that to me is a good return on my money. It really is. And the arbitrage, if you will, from what I pay the insurance company, the cost of capital, to what I'm earning on the 6%. So most would say, well, if you're paying the insurance company 5 and they're charging and you're paying the loan back at 6, you're making a 1-point spread. I'm making way more than that because of the velocity of money and the APR. The APR is the number I'm using. Yeah. So every year I'm getting a higher and higher return on my money and I'm taking zero risk. So for me, the cars is really just maybe a privilege that I have where I have capital to do this that isn't going to affect my outside business, investment, capability. So I have liquidity. It just, to me, was a better place to move money than anything else that I could find.
Yeah. So you would agree with me that if someone had a liquidity choice between an asset or a liability, that they may be mistaken if they take all their precious liquidity and put it into a car.
The thing I would actually, and I've been talking about this with Devin a lot, is one of the things right now, there are a lot of cars out there that lease out phenomenally well. Like I'll just use Jeeps, for example. They have a really high residual value. So if you go to lease a Jeep, like you could get a $60,000 Jeep for like $600 a month. If you were to try to finance that, that's over $1,000 a month. So like I would tell people, all right, listen, like if you got the money in the policy and you have debts or you have something else we can use the money in the policy for, go lease. Find a vehicle that leases really well from a residual standpoint, negotiate down the factoring rate, which is the interest rate they charge in a lease, and get a good deal on a lease. And then you're driving a brand new car, you feel good about it, but then take the difference from what that lease is that you're paying and what you would have paid yourself back at, which is a going financing rate, which is about 6% right now. And then reinvest that back into another policy. Then you'd certainly be ahead. I think there's a lot of ways to play that. I've never really gone public with that. Yeah. So this is the first time I've mentioned that, but we talk behind the scenes about it all the time. I don't think that's a bad strategy at all. I just think people make a lot of mistakes. So it's from the public standpoint, it's just easier. And I think you can respect this. It's just easier sometimes just to teach the one way. And then people can kind of figure out the logic behind what's best for them or work with us to figure that logic out later.
I think that's what Dave Ramsey, I'll give him flowers. He's very consistent. I think behind closed doors, he's not an idiot. He knows if he can get a 0% loan.
Behind closed doors, he owns whole life.
If you can 0% loan put into treasuries, you're not really taking on any risk. But he's being consistent because he knows when he gives an inch, people get more confused. And what you're saying is, hey, like every case is going to be a little bit different, but I had Carlton Dennis on the other day, and he's talking about like, hey, I'm not giving tax advice when I'm on TikTok. I'm getting people to think different, but obviously when they work with me or our team, it's every situation is going to be the same. But I'm trying to like inspire and tell instead of telling them no. And I do think, to your credit, there's many people that are starting to save more because of the desire to buy a dream car. And by that desire, you're getting them to save $3,000 a month instead of their $1,500 uninspired. And it's really hard to compete if you're increasing someone's savings rate. That's not a math problem. That's a heart problem.
The conversation sparked a lot of debate, and it left one question unanswered. Does the math actually support what I've been doing?
For the math geeks out there, what this is saying.
I want to jump into the Chris analysis.
I could prove you wrong mathematically
Chris,
every day.
Actually, you can't, because this is like pure math. I don't understand why this is so difficult that you don't even need to run the math. There's nothing to talk about. It should be black and white.
And Caleb and Hutch ran the numbers to see what option came out better. And really the initial debate was borrowing from the insurance company at 6% at simple interest versus taking a car loan from a bank at 4% interest. And then taking the extra money and putting it back into the policy. So I believe the bank loan won. But what we're gonna do today is we're gonna put an end to this debate, and we're gonna prove it with the math.
We all need a car in today's world. For the most part, I mean, unless you're in a metro and you can take public transportation, ride your bike, but pretty much a car is kind of a staple. You know, everybody needs some form of transportation. So a lot of people ask me, how come you're always talking about cars? You know, because it's not like it's the sexiest thing that can come out of infinite banking. And my answer is always the same, is because everybody pretty much has one. So it's a mass market a mass market thing that we can solve a problem. And in all of my taglines, I say something that I catch a lot of crap for. And I think that's the important thing. I say, you know, what I teach shows people how to get all the money back for every single car they buy, drive, and own. And people are like, no, that isn't true. But I have done this. I don't even know how many cars I've had, but let's just say 15 to 20 cars that I have done using this system. And I will tell you, it has worked 100% of the time. And, you know, when I look at it, and again, I just want to preface, folks, this is just my perception on this whole thing. We're going to get into the math, but my perception, when I look at it, I look at it from this standpoint. It really is a control thing for me, because if I finance a car with the bank, which I absolutely have done that. As a matter of fact, in full transparency, there is a big truck that I just bought that's owned by the company. Part of that truck is financed with my private banking system, and part of that truck is financed with the bank. So it's kind of a hybrid model. And a lot of people might say, well, why would you do it that way? And really it comes down to my CFO wanting to protect from a liability standpoint that vehicle by having a bank lien on it. And that's why we did that. So I've done both sides, and every single time I will finance the car from my private banking system, no matter what. And this is not something we would ever tell to the public. This isn't something we would ever have a conversation with the cars, but I want to speak frankly from mine. I would fund a car even if I could get a 4% interest rate, which you can't find today, but if I could get a 4% interest rate on a bank loan, and my policy loan, let's just hypothetically say it was 6%, I would still finance it with my policy at the 6%. And that's not what I would tell any one of our thousands of clients ever. I would never suggest that. I would always, in my rule, I have a rule. This is an easy rule. So if anyone wants to write this down, this is rule number 1. Never take a loan from your policy unless that money, that loan money, can be used at a higher rate than what your cost of capital is. It's that simple. So if my cost of capital is 6, then I would only put that money out if I could buy a car. You know, if I could get a car if the financing on a car was 6.5% or more, you know, it's got to be more. But you just all heard me correctly. In my life, in my world, why would I ever use a policy at 6% when I could get a car loan from a bank at 4%? And I think that's what we got to get into, because like that's just where it starts. Contrary to the fact that that's not what we would ever tell anyone, and I think you and I can agree with that, and Craig would agree too. It's still my preference to do it that way, and it comes down to control. It comes down to I own and control the terms, and not only that, I no matter what happens in my life, can pause, change, or modify the terms, the payments, or everything along with my loan because I own the banking system.
So you're saying, Chris, even though you will mathematically be paying more in interest, you value the 6% loan from your policy versus the 4% because you have a lot more control and flexibility. Is that, am I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's
one word, cash flow. I control the cash flow. So a simple way, and then we'll get into maybe the numbers, or we'll go wherever you want, but we have all the numbers.
Let's dive in. Craig, do you want to say anything before we dive into the?
This sounds strange coming from me because I'm a numbers guy, but there are math reasons to make a decision. There's non-math reasons to make a decision, and I'm okay with that. And I think through today's conversation, if people understand the mechanics of what's going on, then they can make the best decision for them. And that's what we should be doing as practitioners, is guiding them through that. But I'm looking forward to having
say more non-math reasons. Non-math reasons will trump math because behavior, just look at America, behavior and belief and hope are far stronger than a spreadsheet. And so I think it's important to understand it, but then you also just have to say, how is this impacting someone's life? And that's something that is, I want to do more talking about, because that is ultimately the trump card, but it's a good trump card. If this changes someone's way that they view themselves or their situation, they show up more powerfully. It would be hard for me to say anything about critiquing what they're doing if it's making them feel better.
Yeah, the other piece I would like to add to this as well is, we do have conversations with people who say, hey, I want to take that money, put it into an investment, have that investment buy my car. That's all great, but it really depends on all the other things you have in your personal economy. Do you have reserves? Do you have these other things in place? Because if that investment breaks, and we do know investments can break, well, now we don't have our car payment. We have this debt. So sometimes we have to look at everything holistically and make those decisions. So, but yeah, I think today's discussion is more about looking at the math, and then we can overlay those non-mathematical reasons why we may do something.
That's great. All right.
But so Chris, I think, to start, we kind of looked at what are some rates that are available today in cars. Now, if you have really, really good credit, you might be able to get a 4-ish, 4.5%, maybe a little higher 4% loan on a brand new car with like really, really good credit. But if we're buying used cars, most people are probably going to be in the 6, 7-ish, maybe even higher ranges based on credit scores. So in today's world, at the time of this recording, I think Chris's way is going to math out, maybe in a better environment where rates are lower. Yours may math out a little better. But with all that said, Chris, where do you want to go next? I mean, do we want to?
Well, let's just dive right in. I mean, I think, we've laid the foundation well enough. And, listen, we're not going to use a Porsche or anything like that. We're just going to use what I view as one of the probably better or, top SUVs you could buy. And we just ran it on a Toyota Grand Highlander. I mean, they're just a great vehicle. So let's just look at it. And they're affordable.
Yeah, I was looking at cars recently, like Suburbans and all, and I was amazed. I'm like, are people dropping 6 figures on Suburban? Like, I was like, it tells you how not of a car person I am. I still am driving my 2018 Tesla Model 3. So it was like a cold plunge to the face when I started seeing some of these prices.
Oh, don't look too much deeper, because it just gets sicker and sicker and sicker the deeper down that rabbit hole you go on what cars actually cost, which is why we figured, all right, let's be realistic and look at a Toyota Grand Highlander, because like for what you get with this vehicle and a Toyota, it's a heck of a car.
Love it.
There it is, right there on the
There
screen.
it is. Yeah. So, we don't want to make this necessarily a presentation. We have some slides just for discussion. So you may ask, why am I using this $54,300? Why so specific? $1,200 a month towards that 6% policy loan. I will pay that off in 51 months. Okay. Because as Chris shared, every $1,200 is going to reduce principal by $1,200. Interest gets calculated and set to the side. So if you're familiar with simple interest calculations like on a HELOC, we put that money towards our HELOC, that principal gets reduced, interest gets calculated, but guess what they do every month? they add it back on to the principal. That's why a HELOC loan is not as efficient as a policy loan. So we're able to actually be more efficient inside of this policy loan and get this thing paid off.
So, and Craig, just to be clear, if you go back the other slide, the payment is $1,000 and the person financing is going to pay $1,000 for 60 months and they're going to save an additional $200. And then in scenario 2, they're making a payment, and we're just assuming same interest rates because if I recall, it was one was at 6%, one was at 4%, but we're just going to assume apples to apples at this point.
No, let's keep it the same because it'll tie right in. Let's keep your loan at the bank like we just showed at 4, and let's assume, Craig, if I'm not mistaken, 6%. With the policy loan, right?
Correct. Yeah. So we have taken
the other one is the bank financing at 4%.
Yep.
Yeah. So one is bank financing at 4%.
Okay.
That's what we're doing here. So this is, I go down to my local bank, maybe even at the dealership. I'm taking $54,300 over 60 months at 4%. That's $1,000 a month.
Makes sense.
Now over that 60 months, I'll be paying $5,701 in interest.
Makes sense.
With $54,300 back. Okay.
Yep. So you're saying, and then you're saying, I just want to better understand this, that at 6%, you would be able to pay off, go to that next slide. You'd be able to pay off 9 months earlier because of how, you want to just explain that again?
Yeah, this is important, Craig. So it's important that everybody understands how a policy loan works compared to like a HELOC or a bank loan.
All right, Caleb, that's a good question. And the way the policy loans work is that we want to think about that $1,200 payment. So we've taken a $54,300 loan at 6%. And when we structure a $1,200 monthly payment back to that loan, every month that balance is decreasing by $1,200. The insurance company calculates the interest, sets that to the side, and we just keep doing that throughout the months. Now, each $1,200 is going to become available in cash value again. So that's where some of that control and liquidity comes from that Chris was talking about.
Right. Can I while you were talking, I did run on my calculator, and I put that a $54,300 present value at $1,200 payment at 6% interest rate would pay, and this is just a traditional loan, would pay off the loan at 51 years, 0.14. So 51. So it's maybe it's slightly less efficient, but the payment, and I just want to make sure that I'm getting this right, the actual payment would be, if you did 12%, would actually be $1,044.55. Did you see that to be true?
Yes.
Your guys' then?
Yeah, that's pretty correct. Yeah,
okay.
That's in the ballpark.
So in this case, you're paying essentially a little bit over $150 more per month. Of course, it's going to pay off. So you have the two things working for you. You have the policy versus how a traditional bank calculates interest, but then you also have you're paying extra, and even on a traditional bank, I'm seeing 51 years or 51 months as well. So I'm tracking with math so far.
Okay.
And so we're in a good place.
Yeah, and I think the thing just to highlight for the audience is you'll see on the payment schedule, this is the $1,200 payment that's going back into the policy loan. And if you look at the balance, it goes down by $1,200 every month.
Yep.
Now, we're accumulating interest, but that's not getting added to the balance. And so at the end of our policy year, we've accrued $2,790 of interest
that you pay to the insurance company.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's an option here. We can either say, pay it out of cash, or I don't want to pay it. And in this case, I'm not going to pay it. It gets added back into my balance.
Okay. Explain that again. So we're with the $1,200 payment, are you adding the interest that's going to the insurance company or not in this equation?
Yes, this $2,790 is the interest we accumulated for the first year. we're not paying it. We're just adding it right back into our principal balance, and we'll work that down over time.
Okay,
This
I'm
is
gonna we'll continue. I may have questions as we go about
okay.
what you're saying there.
So it
Because
does.
you technically have two options. I mean, you could write the check to the insurance company and pay them that interest there, or you could just let the insurance company add that to the loan. In this scenario, we're just adding it back to the loan because the $1,200 payment in this scenario that I would be making back to my policy, I'd already calculated the interest into that $1,200.
Okay,
So therefore, I'm just paying principal and interest payments,
I
okay,
see.
just like you would, but it's all going to principal during those 12 months until the insurance company,
I see. And
actually
at 51 months, you're fully paid off from the insurance company, right? Like,
correct.
Correct.
okay,
Yep.
okay. So
You're
we're tracking. It's
yep,
a way. It's how that money is getting credited.
that's
Correct.
it.
And
Okay,
it's
great.
actually a little over 50 months because at month 50, you see here, we
Yeah.
have $1,110.71 left. So we'll pay that off. Now, what we're doing in this scenario is, let's just say Chris has another 9 months of paying that $1,200. He can put that into PUAs. So in person A who financed with a bank and has $200, go ahead and put that into the policy as paid up additions monthly. Chris is going to pay his loan back, be done in a little over 50 months. He's going to take the rest and start putting it into his PUA.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So that's where our numbers are coming from. Now,
And real quick, before you move on, Craig,
yeah.
Caleb, you mentioned something really important because I got to believe anyone watching this was probably sitting there saying, well, why wouldn't I just take the $1,200 that Chris or, person B is putting into the policy and then just put that down toward my bank finance loan, like you had mentioned. And you ran the math with your present value calculator and that paid it off in 51 months. But as you just saw, if you did that exact same thing, which is what we're doing with the policy loan, you pay it off in a month more than 50 months, so 50 months. What would that be? It's not quite 51 months. So there's a little efficiency there. Is it worth writing home about? No, but I think that was important
Right.
because I think a lot of people were thinking that.
Right.
Sorry, didn't mean to
And then
interrupt.
just for the So we'll continue. If you happen to just put the full 1,200 a month to a 4% annual interest rate, you pay that off with the bank from 48 months, almost, let's just round it up to 49 months. So what you're seeing is overpaying on some of these loans. You can really knock down it pretty aggressively. So let's continue. But no, I appreciate you mentioning that, Chris.
Yeah. So what we were trying to do with the math is just say, if you're putting 1,200 into person A's system, we're going to put 1,200 into person B's system. And then, of course, the other big element here, which I know this conversation isn't about policy design, and there's probably going to be a lot of people that look at the policy I put together and say, well, I would never do a 60-40. This is not a policy that I typically design, but for our example, I built a policy with a certain dump-in size, and I want to show that just so everybody knows this is the policy design we used. Whether we drove the CAC value higher or lower, we're still using the exact same policy for person A and person B, putting in either $200 a month in paid up additions in person A's scenario, or waiting until month 51 and then
Put the full 1,200.
Yeah. So
Okay.
if it's okay, I want to share kind of the policy
Yeah.
mechanics, and then we can jump into that. So I'll go ahead.
Please do. And just for the audience, know that when Craig's sharing his screen, he's turning his camera off just to make sure that the internet flows smoothly. So that's why we can't see your beautiful face when you share the screen, Craig.
All right. So here we are and I'll just, before I jump into that, I want to share we're going to jump around here just a little bit. So we have a whole IBC.
Okay.
And the way it was designed was a $90,000 initial dump in, $25,000 annual premium. And what I end up doing is I use 40% of that for base, 60% for paid up additions, mail, 840 standard rating, non-direct recognition. So this is the ingredients, some of the ingredients of the policy.
And just for compliance, folks, when you're looking at the 90,000 initial dump in on the screen, that 90,000 is just an excess premium deposit you're making into the paid up additions rider.
Yep.
Yeah. So whether we didn't do a dump in or we did do a dump in, I just wanted to have a policy where we just had an equal footing from the start to have enough to buy the car, have some growth in there. But everybody's situation would be different. But with that said,
okay, can we just go back? I just want to see, because I'm seeing this for the first time. So you have cumulative return.
Explain the sheet a little bit, Craig.
Sure.
Yeah. So cumulative return, is that the IRR? Oh, no, that can't be the IRR.
Now, we don't have the IRR in this picture, but think inside of an illustration, there's multiple pages. What we're doing is we're taking the data out of the illustration. For compliance perspectives, we never make our own numbers up for cash value, death benefit, dividends.
Right.
But what this is doing is this is showing us at the end of year one, I would have put in a total of this amount of premium. This is my guaranteed cash value, guaranteed death benefit. And then, of course, we have our non-guaranteed side with our dividends and cash value. Now, what we're showing here is essentially a couple efficiency points. Now, we don't always say the most efficient policy is the best policy, but a lot of times when we're driving cash value high, that's what we're trying to do. Can we get a higher cash value policy than this? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And so this is just what you'd say is a 60 base or 40 base, 60% UA. But I think this is really important for everybody to hear. There's going to be some cost up front. And I know, Caleb, you have some calculators that show some of this cost. Others show this cost. I like the fact that we show the cost, because if I'm putting in $117,400, my cash value is $105. What happened to that other $11,766?
Yeah.
Well, there's mortality charges, there's commissions, there are things that are coming out of that, right?
The cumulative return, if you were to ask me what cumulative return would be, I would say it's an IRR return, but why is it not?
No, it is close to an IRR. It's basically looking at
I'm seeing things that jump up to 5, 8, 11. So I'm curious how the calculation works.
Yeah, actually, Craig, go ahead and explain that.
So this is just looking at, over here we have our cumulative premium.
Okay.
And we're comparing that to our cash value and the growth of that. So it's not really an internal rate of return. It's just looking at cumulatively where are we? When did we cross over? And at what point do we hit those positive strides? So in this policy, in year 6, we put in 252. We have 256. So if you look at that 32,296 over the cumulative that we put in, we're 1.9% ahead.
That would be like in the book Becoming Your Own Banker, where R. Nelson Nash asked the question, how much did the insurance cost you? And he says, nothing. That would be the point where it cost you nothing.
Yeah. I see. So it's not an IRR calculation, but you're taking the gross number, what you've put in, the gross percentage, the gross cash value available, and then you're showing the difference in that. And I'm not to, I know that we have a lot to cover. Do you guys have an ability to show an IRR line? Because anyone that knows me, I know that that's like my favorite thing to look at. Is that in, or could that be added for people that were interested?
We had it in here and then we pulled it out. So it is something we could easily calculate, but from an infinite banking perspective, I'm not personally as concerned about this cumulative return, because as we start whole life policies, that first word, whole life, is how long we want to keep it. And so I'm not necessarily concerned, because here's the way I look at it, Caleb. If I got hit by a bus and this was my policy and I died in year 4, if I put in 199, is my family okay getting 1.9 minus any loans? Sure, financially you won. But if I can live longer than
you didn't win, your family.
Right. You lost.
Arbitrage.
Yeah, I lost. My family, wins. But
there could be an argument there, though. That could be a whole nother episode about did you actually lose, or did you go on to a much better place?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, yes. I think there's a lot. There's a lot there for a channel. That's a whole different podcast. So
okay. I see what's happening here. And can I just point out one just comment? This is
Sure.
this is an equivalent, and correct me if I'm wrong, when people say like in a 30-year mortgage, at the end of 30 years, your interest rate may have been 3%, but your your total interest that you paid over 30 years is like 70 or 80 or 90 or 100%. Is that essentially what you're doing the same thing here in the cumulative? Like if your house is 100,000 and over 30 years you paid 200 total, the cumulative return over 30 years would be 100%. Would that, you get what I'm saying? If it was an investment, but if it was, am I tracking with that?
I'm not sure if.
So let me rephrase that. I won't include, let's say over 30 years, I put in $100,000, and at the end of 30 years, my account value is at 200,000. So I put in 100, the account value is at 200. The cumulative return in that scenario is not
100.
showing. It would be 100,000. It doesn't matter if it took me
Yeah.
70 years, 2 years, whatever. We're not factoring in time. We're just factoring in straight. You put in 100, it's at 200. The cumulative return is 100%. Am I on?
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. I
think
understand
another
what you're doing here. Yep.
Now, another thing to just really point out there, because a lot of people get hung up on the different returns, the IRR, cumulative, cash on cash. Which one do I use? And it depends on how you're using the policy. If you're using the policy as a store of wealth, cumulative becomes an important one to look at. But IRR really becomes the one that I would use as a metric as a store of wealth, not using it for infinite banking. For infinite banking, when you're looking at it, you're really looking at it year over year because it's like a bank account, right? So I'm putting money in, I'm then taking loans and using that money to take back the banking function. So therefore, the cash on cash return, or what I earned that year on the deposit I put in that year, becomes a really important metric.
Okay. Yeah, we maybe that will be a part 2, because I believe, and this could be a flaw in my thinking, but I think IRR is the most accurate across the board, whether I use it for infinite banking or whatnot. But I understand cumulative. Cash on cash that's just the year that you put in the premium, what it increased by. So it's the annual increase.
Yeah, if we look at year 3, if by the end of year 3 you've put in $27,400, our cash value growth, because of all the previous years of compounding, is now $28,766.
Makes sense.
We now have a 5% cash on cash, which is really just looking at that year's dollar that went in. What did I get back?
Increase. And then the net cash value growth, that's essentially the same thing in just a gross number versus percentage.
Correct.
And then the net cash value growth monthly, you guys just divided that by 12?
Yep, divided out.
Got it. Okay.
And kind of
good.
The purpose of those columns, or if somebody gets to retirement and they just wanted to live off of some of that growth, what would that number be? And so you can do some what ifs there.
Okay. I appreciate you taking time. I thank you for taking the time to walk through this with me. I see what's going on, and I'm tracking.
Gotcha. And so what's important and why I wanted to bring this up is just to share that, if we're funding, and actually this isn't the one, this is the one I wanted.
Okay.
This is the one where we put the 90,000 and the 25 a year. And then this would be an example of funding the policy and setting it to the side. We would have at the end of year 5, $211,795 of cash value. Now, what we're going to do is take this policy and we're going to say, all right, Caleb, put your $200 of paid up additions extra per month. Chris, when you're done paying your loan off, take your extra and start shoving it in. So what we're going to see is this $211,795 is kind of our baseline, right? Now what we're going to do is go up into the policy where, Caleb, you're putting in $200 every month for extra PUA, so you drove your cash value to $224.
And what was the original?
It was $211.
$211.
And I've got this on some slides as well.
Okay. And then putting the additional 200, what would that be annually? 2,400 extra. Okay.
Yep.
Brings that to 224. Got it.
So if we look at this, you put in 227 versus the 225, but really the way the math comes out is this is the comparison of the two. So Chris waited until a little after 50 months and started shoving in extra PUA. You had been doing it every month for 5 years. So Chris's number, and again, just going back, this is the 4% bank loan.
Yes.
The 6% policy loan. So Caleb, your policy ends up at 224,569 and Chris is at 222, 210. So there's a $2,359 advantage that you had at the end of that 5 years.
Can I ask another just question based on, in the first couple of years you're showing negative. Does this only what's the difference if we did this? I don't know how fast we can do this. So maybe I don't want to throw a wrench, but what would happen if these policies were mature?
Mm-hmm.
Does it change at all in your opinion? Like if it's in year 10 and we start this versus, because again, I'm just pontificating here, but we're essentially taking the cumulative returns and cash on cash returns, and it's my understanding that we're just adding additional $200 to that, but the percentages don't change. Is that correct?
The percentages wouldn't change.
Okay.
Yeah, the percentages. I don't think we're going to see a big difference there, but
I think that's fair. Yeah. I wonder what this would look like. And again, like if we started at 10 years, if there would be any difference or if it would be exactly the same. I would imagine it would be different based on how this is being calculated because of, but I'm just, this is where I'm going to be excited. Hopefully I get access to start running my own numbers in this stuff because this will be great. So let's continue. I don't want to throw another wrench. That's just a question I have. So you're saying that going through this technically over 5 years in what you're just showing, the difference is $2,359 and it's in favor of the person that took the bank loan and paid an additional $200. Am I tracking?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. I'm tracking so far.
So I think by pure mathematics standpoint, the argument we had in the beginning it was just not an argument, but just the differences we had in the beginning. If somebody were to be able to get a 4% loan at the bank versus taking out a 6% policy loan, running them side by side, this would be the outcome. The person who took the bank loan would have an extra $2,359 after the 5 years, all things considered equal. What I would have won by is I would have just had the flexibility that if something happened in my life where I needed to change that car payment, use that car payment, or anything along the lines of control, then I would benefit there, but it would have come at a cost of $2,359. So I think we can close the gap on that.
Yeah, and does this policy doesn't actually show the loan, the cash value getting, because in person B, or I just want to make sure are we showing the actual collateral hit to the policy here?
So this is a non-direct recognition, so there wasn't one.
But, okay, now you're correct. But there is, in the person taking the life insurance loan has initially $54,000-ish less in their cash value than the person that took the bank. Now over time it equals itself out, but that just goes back to again philosophy. I would say unless I put all my money somewhere else, I would actually say that I'd have just as much control, potentially more. We could debate that, but I wouldn't necessarily.
Very fair argument. Yep.
Okay. Let's move on. But I think this is well done, gentlemen. I'm tracking so far.
Okay. So, this kind of set the stage for, all right, well, at what point do we actually see an equalizer of what would that bank financing need to be to equal out that policy loan at 6%? It actually turned out to be somewhere around 5.7%.
I see.
So even though we have a lower financing, we can have a higher financing with policy and still be ahead. But what we end up doing is jumping down to a couple other scenarios. And this was, hey, if we take that same Toyota, I think it was a Grand Highlander, and we financed it at $54,300 for 60 months at 5%.
Yep.
We now have $1,025 of a car payment. So
Yep.
we now have $175 to throw towards PUA.
Yeah, because I think it's fair. 4% loan, very hard to come by, if not impossible. And if you get it, a lot of times you're buying a new car and they're getting you somewhere else. So I think that's I think the 5% is very fair.
Yeah. So then we ran that, and of course you've got now 7,182 of interest on the particular. But since we've already been through all the mechanics, let's just jump to the results, because Chris is still going to be in the same position. He's still using that same 1,200. So his picture doesn't change. But now we're talking about a difference of 721, because you're, instead of running that 200 a month, now you're running 175 a month into paid up additions. So we're starting to get close. This is the 5, and that's where I kept bumping it up, and I came to 5.7 is where we kind of equal.
Nice. 5.7.
And I think a good argument here would be on the other side. Although the first one we said it almost near impossible to find a 4% loan. You put that perfectly, but you probably could find a 5% loan on a new car out there today. It's very realistic. But the other thing to look at is the other side. A policy loan, if you look at the policy loan rates today, they're actually less than 6%. So, as a blend, as an average, there are some that are more, some that are less, but we had the average here somewhere. It was 4.97, to 6.25, but probably the best rate would be like that 5.455 rate right now is what the insurance companies
Chris, do you use third-party lenders on your policies, or you just take a loan directly?
No, it's actually interesting, yes. Because I have so many policies, I chose the easy path so that I didn't have all that minutia of trying to take a policy loan from 15 different policies. So I do use a bank, Boosie Bank, for my cash value line of credit, which gives me one central place to operate from, and I love it. And the bad part is when rates were really high, I got a black eye, right? I took it on the chin. But now that rates have moved down, I'm pretty much right. I'm actually under 6%. I'm, I think, 5.75 on my CV line of credit. And if the Fed drops rates, I'll follow those rates down. So it's a gamble, but I'm on the right side of that gamble right now.
Right. Well, and convenience too. It's like they combine all your policies in one place. You have a checkbook. And
I love
they're actually a sponsor at our event. So you guys are both sponsoring. You'll have to say hi. You'll have to give them a shout out, Chris.
I certainly will, because I've been, and this is not about banks, believe me. Like we are the anti-bank, but like using a bank in some cases is beneficial. And for me, it's a huge convenience point. It gives me so much leverage to be fast and nimble with 15 or 16 different policies consolidated into one. I love it.
We'll make a video, whether it's with you and me, or I'll just make a video on this, because I think it needs more people need to talk about it. And a lot of times people say, like, how in the world do you manage multiple policies? It's not the only way, but it's a pretty darn effective way to do it. So,
not to give us a shout out, but like to manage multiple policies in that context without the bank, you would use the Vault software, because that's exactly.
Well, let's go and let's dive into that. So if
shameless plug, sorry.
Yeah, no, this is great. No, I mean, and we'll have the links to all, if you want to learn more about the Vault software, all the links. You'll hit me up with all the links. So let me just repeat what I'm hearing from you guys. So at 5.7%, that's where it equals. So if someone's paying a 6%, that's where it would equal the 4%.
Well,
a
5.77% bank financed would be pretty equivalent to a 6% policy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the difference between that 30.3 is the way that policies credit loans and all versus how banks. And I don't have any comment on that, because I believe you guys. It's kind of frustrating how so many math people have so many different takes, and it's like even I've done videos, I think you've seen them, Chris, where it's like I've sometimes left more confused. I'm like, okay, and then I had someone the other day reach out to me who I really trust. And he's like, hey, by the way, the the video that you did with so-and-so is wrong. And I'm like,
it is. And that was what we were saying earlier. Like, we found the same thing this person did, and we're like, wait a second. So here's a big thing in today's world, and this is it's something everybody needs to be aware of, is there's so much reliance on AI. And that other person, whose name we'll leave off, we both respect him tremendously, is heavy user of AI. And AI just doesn't always get it right, especially from a math standpoint. But not everybody has a Craig on their team that is better than any AI calculator. But Craig, can you just pull that slide up again and just explain kind of how that error happened with that other individual showing it using his AI calculator?
Yeah, let me pull that up here. And
then just as you're pulling it.
Yeah.
And then, as we kind of get to the end, the last one we're going to look at is 6 and 6, just because that's probably the most realistic comparison, because that's what we would talk to our clients about. And I'm sure yourself, like, if it was equal, how does it play out?
Yep. I think that's great. Yep.
Go ahead, Craig.
So essentially the idea was we're trying to look at what does a 4% and a 6% policy loan look like, using 1,000, using 1,200. So I already showed you with the vault, we should be somewhere a little over 50 months. This, I think, came from an AI calculation saying 52. The interest was calculated at 7406. Now this screen down here is the vault with the exact same numbers, and interest should be 6,827 and paid off in 51.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's
you're saying that the month payoff was 52 when it should have been 51.
Correct.
And the interest was too high.
Yeah.
And that was just a component of AI didn't know how to, technically, AI doesn't know how insurance companies calculate interest, and how you kind of, you're really not being dinged in those 12 months. You're using all of your money to pay down principal versus, where a bank loan, like, there's always interest being applied on a monthly basis. So you have that efficiency point in the policies versus the banks. And that's what AI messed up here.
Okay.
Yeah. And here's good. And here's a treat we'll leave for the audience is when, and I've seen this happen a lot of times, where policyholders will say, hey, I've got some interest due at the end of the year. And let's say it's, $6,000. What they'll do is they'll set aside enough money to accumulate that $6,000 so they can pay that interest at the policy anniversary. That is actually less efficient than just letting that interest roll and putting that $500 towards your principal every month. So instead of saving it, just go ahead and throw it at your loan, because one, if you throw it at your loan, it's available again if you needed it, but it's going to whittle down that principal, and you will be more efficient going into the second year, although that interest is getting tacked on to your principal. So I've done the numbers so many times, I'm confident, just let the interest roll. Pay as much as you can towards the policy loan and let the interest roll.
Appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, now let's jump back up to
6 for 6. 6 for 6.
6 and 6. All right, here we are. If I go to a bank and I get 6% financing on that $54,300 for 60 months, my payment is now $1,050, which means I have $150 that person A can put into their PUAs every month.
Yep.
So this is where and remember I said 5.77, so now we're going to be even more favorable on the policy, but this is where the person B, or Chris in this case, would end up with $917 to his favor as opposed to the.
And that just comes down to, again, and the gentleman that called me when that other person that we reference, he's like, hey, your math is wrong. I was like, yes, I appreciate you saying that. Will you come on and do something? So we're like, this will be good. And I think this will be really great to better understand, because I'm embarrassed to admit that I get maybe the concepts, but I need to better understand the math. That's very much how I like to roll. And so I'm looking forward to having this with an objective person that will walk through the difference between insurance companies, maybe HELOCs, how mortgages, how car loans. I find that piece of content would be really great for our channel. So, so you're saying that in this all being equal, bank at 6%, life insurance being at 6%, person B, i.e. Chris, would be ahead 5 years at the end by $917. Am I seeing that correct?
You got it. Yep, that's correct.
Okay. Yeah, and that's significant when you a $900 difference it's what is that? What is that? A 0.5% difference if you look at that is enough of a difference to make sure that we point out. So I appreciate you bringing that out.
Yeah.
You had mentioned something earlier that I think now is the perfect time. You had mentioned, what if we were to have fast forwarded this policy to year 10 and looked at a really efficient policy and then run the numbers? And they very well may be different. And I'm sure Craig, once you plant the seed in the human calculator, it just goes. I'm sure he will. But the cool part here to understand is, whether this makes sense for people to use their own banking system to finance cars, or kind of just do what you do, where you use bank financing and then you invest your cash value in different places like Bitcoin,
Right.
XRP, which right now is a really cool story with Genius Act and Clarity Act. But the whole thing is we're never going to just buy one car. We just showed you one car. If you did the 6.6, you can see you do effectively get all the money back for the car, because you're paying yourself back. Plus you've got the interest and the compounding in your favor. But if you did this again now in that 5th year, let's say you decide you want a new car, Grand Highlander comes out with a brand new version that's twin turboed, and you're like, I need that one. You trade your Grand Highlander in, it's bought and paid for. So now you got the full credit there, and then you buy another vehicle. The second time you do this and the third time you do this, you keep winning because all of that compounding on the money never stops. So it just gets better and better the more cars you buy. And I did a YouTube video, where on a G-Wagon that I bought, not bragging, but just whatever, it's a vehicle.
Yeah.
And I'm way overpaid for this G-Wagon. I didn't drive it a lot because I just didn't love it. And then I sold the G-Wagon, I can't remember, 3 years after I bought it, 2.5 years after I bought it. And I still made $33,000. And just to put this into perspective, I bought it for $170,000. I sold it for like $130,000. So most people would be like, how in the world did you make $33,000? And what we just went through is how I made $33,000. I controlled the cash. And, anyone's welcome to watch it, but it's just a math game. But again, there was several components that we didn't cover today that would have made that happen. But the simple point is everybody's got their own flavor of what they want to do.
Totally.
So again, it's not really whether you should do this or shouldn't do this. It's just I do this because now I don't want risk. There's so much risk in the marketplace that I am risk off, if you will. I got a light switch. I've been doing this so long. I don't want to ride the market roller coaster. So only money I have in the market is in treasuries. So therefore, for me, I can make more buying cars and paying myself back with interest as long as I have the cash flow, which I do. So, this makes sense.
You're betting on your ability to pay.
Betting on my ability to pay the car payments to the cars. And because of that, I'm literally winning more so than I think I would in the stock market, but
Chris, can I ask so going back to the G-Wagon question, you said that you earned $30,000 even though you bought
give
it.
Give or take, yeah. I don't remember the exact
we'll just round. So you bought it at 170, sold it at...
It was like a smidgen over 130.
Okay, so $40,000 loss on that asset, but you're saying that the policy itself over that time increased by $70,000, so to make up the $40,000 loss, and then the additional 30, is that...
There's one more important thing, because the compounding would have never made $33,000. I mean, it's the policies will never make you rich. They're just slightly better than what we normally are taught to use, which is banks and savings accounts. So where I really made that, and we didn't get into that in this discussion, but how I do it is when I shopped for that G-Wagon, rates were in the 7% range. Okay, that's what the rates were. So when I financed that with my own banking system and paid the $170,000, I paid myself back the equivalent of I think it was 7.74%. Don't hold me to that. Watch the video.
Watch the video.
But it's something like that, where when I took the policy loan for the policies I used for that were in the 5% range. So remember, now I had a spread. So we'll keep math simple. If I was paying myself back at 7, but my policy loan interest was 5, I just made a 2% spread. That's how banks really operate, but I was the bank. So I made that spread plus the compounding on the cash value. And and then I controlled the thing. So that's how I ended up making
So
the
you,
money.
in a way, I'm not you overpaid, but that right by 2%. So you're arbitraging your that,
my own money.
and then you also took the policy cash value and you added those two together, and that's together. You not only you made a little over 30,000.
Yes, sir. And I'll go back to something I said earlier, but it's important to say it again now, is when I do this, when I look at a car, I just go to market. I literally go to bankrate.com and I find and they'll tell you based on your credit score, they'll say, hey, this bank is the cheapest interest rate. And then it'll give you a monthly payment based on the term. That's all I do. I don't make this complicated. And I set up a bill pay for that exact amount and I pay it back. So yes, I was overpaying. I mean, could I have done it at the 5% that the policy loans charge? Sure. But I was overpaying because if I wanted to buy that vehicle with bank financing, I would have had to pay bank rates. So why not pay myself back the same amount I was willing to pay a bank?
Chris, can I, this is, I'm really glad that we're talking about this. And I'm trying to articulate this the best way. So and Mr. Bird does a similar, he has similar videos and we've had discussions around this. The G-Wagon, when you say something like, hey, like you made $30,000 from the G-Wagon, it is true, but there's other variables that were already happening. The only difference is you injected more money because of the behavior of bringing the G-Wagon in. So I want to acknowledge that. Is it fair to say though, not because I know some of the backstory about this, zero regrets here, but is it fair to say that you would have been better off not having the G-Wagon? Because the policy is still working, and that 2%. I guess I struggle. And I have to be fair here. You're injecting an extra 2%, which is totally valid. And I'm thinking of like you could have saved the difference, but you could have easily spent the difference, and you're just forcing yourself to save more because of that. So the injecting 2%, I'm not necessarily sure like how to compare that, but I'm just wondering like if you had to go back and do it, and I know that the G-Wagon brought some enjoyment and stuff, but if you would have done nothing, I'm wondering what would have happened if, number one, you would have done nothing and see what the policy would have done.
I would have been better off doing. You mean not buying the G-Wagon?
Yeah, not buying.
I would have been better off for sure, and I shouldn't have bought the G-Wagon. It was just
I'm just trying to be like, because sometimes like I get what because that's why I like long form, because we're having a discussion. I think, and you have to in short form, you have to get people's attention. You're 100 times better than I am. I need to follow your footsteps to get more of a following. But I think it's like when we say like, hey, I made money by a car, but I lost, like part of it's just like, okay, like that's where it's like, well, when it's really like, hey, I created a system that's going to make money regardless. It's compounding every single year. Mm-hmm. So even though there was things that happened, this could be an equivalent to an investment losing 30 grand kind of deal. It's like, obviously that investment, I wish I wouldn't have done, but thank goodness that I have a solid foundation that's getting better at every single year to kind of like make it up for that. But if I didn't make the investment, I would have been even better off. And I think that is the distinction that I'm trying to have in my head.
Oh my gosh, it's the exact way to look at it. And, I talk to a lot of family offices, and family offices love what we do, and they love the infinite banking, they love whole life policies, but for a different reason than what we would. So how they look at it is, for a certain percentage, a family office, I do some work with, I'm not going to use names, but the Hilton Wealth Group, okay, which is Hilton Family's family office. And they love whole life insurance. They love it. But here's how they use it. So family offices with that sum of money, their number one thing is preservation of capital and in pacing inflation. That's what they do with the majority. But they always have this slush fund, we'll call it, a percentage of the portfolio that they take heavy risk on. So speculative money, venture money, as they would call it. And they put that money out there, and that money could just vanish, and that's okay. That's the risk they take. So what they do is they layer whole life insurance underneath as a baseline for two reasons. Number one, the cash value is guaranteed to growth. So for them, it's a hedge. That's all it is an IRR is the number they use. It's just an IRR hedge against losses with this speculative money or overall portfolio growth or losses. Yeah. Secondarily, and more importantly, these families understand legacy. I mean, they have enough money where they know they're not going to spend it. So it rolls and rolls. So the death benefit becomes the ultimate hedge. They could lose everything in their portfolio in speculative investments. The markets could literally fall apart. We could have a complete collapse of the financial system. And these family offices know there's a baseline death benefit that will regenerate for the next generation and recoup all the losses that ever could have possibly happened. So it is the ultimate hedge, but it's a hedge that requires the death. The death then populates the next generation, and they didn't skip a beat. This is why the Rockefellers have been, constantly one of the wealthiest families for multiple generations, is this exact system. So I didn't mean to go there, but
no, I think that's perfect. I think that's a great way to end. Yeah,
there's a very important narrative that when you go beyond just stupid cars and buying cars like we spent the time, there's so much more of a use case. And I love that you said that, where you compared the G-Wagon to an investment losing. Perfect analogy.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing that's really cool is we haven't talked about the critical and chronic illness riders. We haven't talked about the death benefit that's increasing, the permanent death benefit increasing each year. And all of that stuff is just factored into, it really becomes, we've had a discussion about both people doing life insurance. How rare is that? Most of the time we're talking about someone who's not doing anything. They don't have permanent life insurance. And then it's like, it becomes an unfair advantage. And so Chris, thank you, man. I appreciate this. Craig, you're awesome. Appreciate you sharing the screen. And any final thoughts? I think that this episode's going to be watched. I don't know if it'll go as viral. Hopefully it gets as many views, because I think it's a really good part 2 to what we talked about. And I think it's going to open up for more conversations as well. But I think it's pretty clear. I think it was a really clean way to do it. And I appreciate you guys putting the time into doing the presentation.
Yeah, I owe a lot of it to Craig. Craig is the brains behind all of this stuff and the math guy who proves it instead of just says, hey, I think this is how it will work. So there's no more thinking. It's just proof.
What's the equivalent of a radio voice? What is it? We got to come up with something about brains. It's.
I don't have the radio voice, but I do appreciate you having us on and just having the discussion, because it's fun talking about it and just educating the audience on how these things work. And it does sound funny coming from me, but there's math and there's non-math reasons to do things. So.
And I think there's a lot more non-math reasons. The more, the older I get, we're not going off of biological age, Chris. We're going off of real age. I very much realize that math is a very small reason, and behavior and people's beliefs become way bigger. And so the best thing that we can do is almost become life coaches and help reverse engineer people's inputs, time, their beliefs, how they view themselves, how they make money, their investment philosophy, and getting all that dialed in could be make or break someone versus them spending all the time on the spreadsheet but not making their life better.
I agree.
It's an equivalent of someone whose income has never increased and they're trying to figure out where to invest. And maybe the question needs to be, well, maybe invest in your ability to earn more, because that blows out any type of spreadsheet out of the water. But if you're not even asking that question, you're just using the constraint numbers that you're giving yourself. And I think there's a lot that can happen there. And that's one of the benefits of the infinite banking concept is the word infinite. Hopefully it gets people to think a little bit outside the box, which could yield in things you can't even calculate in an IR calculation. So,
you see, infinite banking isn't about blindly following some strategy. It's about determining whether or not the strategy makes sense for you. And that strategy should make sense whether it makes you money, saves you money, or, most importantly, gives you flexibility and, what I love, control. As you saw, the lowest interest rate doesn't always produce the best overall outcome. If you want to learn more about the infinite banking concepts and how it might work for you, then check this video out right here. We're going to walk through different ways to use this and, most importantly, how it could be used in your case.